This week on the Walk On podcast. You know, life is a series of peaks and valleys, and if you didn't have the valleys, the peaks would be meaningless, right? It would just be this linear life that you're leading. And yes, we want to dissect and learn from those mistakes, but you said it. You also have to give yourself grace. And I think most people, certainly in a leadership role, are probably the hardest critics they're going to find of themselves, right?
Less judgment and less expectations have been two of the greatest things. Daily constant reminders that I bring into my intention is because judging your past actions on today's knowledge is also not fair. Well, did I know that then? And odds are you probably didn't. We do have to be consciously aware of what tape we're continuously playing in our own minds.
Yeah.
Is it telling us that we're greater than what we are, or is it telling us that we're worse than what we are?
Welcome to the Walk On podcast. This is going to be a special bonus episode. We finished season 5 earlier this year, and we decided to wrap up the holiday season and kick off a new year. We'd add a couple episodes. I'm thrilled with our guest today. He's got experience in a similar space of having conversations with people about their leaders, about their journeys. And he's also, as you'll hear, a professional in the HR world. But for those of you that are new here, the Walk On podcast started really a couple of years ago as I was endeavoring in this back portion of my career to really find passion and purpose. I'd kind of hit a rut, some frustration with the direction of my business, and really wanted to explore what I would do next. And I went back to school, and I'm now a certified executive leadership and performance coach, and doing some other things, continuing my public relations work, but starting a podcast to talk to people who are really just doing interesting things, following a passion, a purpose, and wanted to learn from them. And hopefully you as listeners can learn from them as well. So with that, I want to bring in our guest for this episode, Kevyn Rustici. He is Vice President and Chief Operating Officer at Boulter Industrial Contractors. He's co-founder of the Timeout with Leaders podcast. As I said, he is having similar conversations. So I'm excited to hear what he's learned, but he's really spent his career empowering leaders in the corporate HR space and is now also leveraging that experience for those conversations that we referenced. So Kevyn, welcome on.
Hey, thank you so much. And thank you again for the opportunity to come on and talk and share a little bit more about that journey.
Yeah. Thrilled you're here. Well, let's start there. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about your bio, your career, current roles, family, all that good stuff.
Yeah. So I guess the proud dad moment, right? Dad of 2. I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and obviously an amazing wife that makes this career all possible. I think without the hard work of our wives and the people at home that really keep that business running, it enables us the ability to have the energy, the headspace, and that focus doing what we do for our day jobs. I currently work, as you mentioned, as a Chief Operating Officer and Vice President here at Boulter Industrial Contractors. But that's definitely, if you asked me even a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, if I would be doing this now, I would say you're crazy. So I actually started with a degree in biology, believe it or not. And I got a number of rejection letters from all the medical schools that I was applying to. And you know, I didn't really try to play a victim in that moment. I just tried to find, okay, what did I enjoy about healthcare? What did I think that I liked and wanted to do in healthcare? And a lot of that revolved around people, the ability to see someone walk in broken, and then you have some level of involvement to see them walk out to the best of their abilities. That felt rewarding. And I loved your lead in with talking about passion and purpose, because I think my purpose has remained the same, but those passions have a way of changing over time. And so taking what I knew, I got into business development. I had a short, brief stint at a country club trying to build the network to try to figure out what I wanted to do and where could I apply the strengths and the gifts that I had been given without having all the expertise. And I think a lot of students now that are graduating are having the same conundrum, right? Yeah. It's an entry-level position that requires 2 to 3 years experience. It's no different than when I first graduated too. So I took a opportunity in business development, cold calling, picking up the phone, really starting to understand, okay, well, what are humans, right? And how do I convince them that of something that they don't even know that they need, that they need to have a conversation so we could potentially help them. So after 9 short months, I wrote a business plan to our president and said, hey, here's all the reasons why you should hire me as an outside sales representative. And that was at Toshiba Business Solutions, which I did that for about another 7.5 years, selling really sexy copier and printer equipment.
They have a purpose, though, Kevin. They have a purpose.
Yeah, they definitely, when they go down, right, it's a big to-do within the office. So, I know a lot more about Rochester and driving all the side streets to deliver toner and help out when the customers had some major issues. But what I enjoyed most about that position was it taught you a lot, right? Those people skills, how to have conversations with anybody. And I go back to even careers previously when I was still in high school and college, being a waiter, being a bartender, and how do I still use those in skills every single day? And it's probably a lot more than what you would think. And then from there, I worked at several other companies. One was more of a human capital software, which got me into the HR world. I didn't really know what HR did until that point. So I became kind of this confidant, but empowerment and enablement, because our HR was kind of that group that everybody were last to be thanked and first to be blamed. So how do you operate in a career like that? Long, right? It can be a burnout. And that's what I was really seeing in HR when I was at ADP. It allowed me to start to peel behind the curtain. We went through the global pandemic, and then that's really where it became very apparent that they had a lot to do within the organization. However, if they continued to focus on administrative tasks, the potential, the value that they would add to the organization was very limited. And that led me then to Gallagher, which got me into the human capital consulting space, and really started to see even more disconnect between what the business really was thinking that it wanted and needed and the realities of the labor market. And then so I did that for a couple of years, and then I had my own consulting practice, really focused on leadership, management, and how HR could turn itself from a cost center to a profit center. And I was on a long-term consulting basis here at Boulter. And then finally they asked me to start full-time, which I was surprised, but also excited at the same time, being in an industry in a space that I had never been in before. I was primarily in white-collar positions, and this was very blue-collar, and starting to understand the difference between a family-owned and operated company and a corporate organization, and the variances and the differences, but also what could one teach the other that would be beneficial, but not too much.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. There's so much rich material. I don't know which thread to pull first. So thanks for sharing that, Ark. I want to go back actually to something you said sort of at the beginning when you were looking at medical schools and didn't get in. You said, I didn't play the victim to the rejection. I don't know that we've talked a lot about that on this podcast. What was that mindset, and maybe now reflecting on it, that mindset of how you addressed and handled that rejection?
Yeah. It took a lot of time, right? I would say that when I look back on I love how you say arc. I always call it a journey. I think growing up as a kid, right, take out being an astronaut or a professional athlete, right? We have this very straight line approach. That's this belief, it's going to be this straight line, but you're looking at a man that has definitely failed more than most, right? Because I tried more than most. I was willing to put myself out there. I was willing to take risks, calculated risks, but willing to step outside that comfort zone. And I definitely learned far more from all my failures than I had my successes. I think success is great. I have a real challenge myself at congratulating or owning that success. It's always like, oh, check that box and move on to the next thing. But failures really paused me and forced me to reflect. And the pandemic was no different. I had to start going back as to what was the story that my mind was telling itself. And the hard medicine that I had to swallow was that I was a victim more than I had ever thought or was willing to believe. So that was some tough medicine to definitely look yourself in the mirror and be honest, right? And not judge. But that really was the crux of me looking back into my history and like, oh, there was a rejection, right? There was a rejection. But what I've now realized is that these are like universal nudges that are really outside of our control. And going through that experience in that moment in time, it sucks, right? It stinks. You don't really have a lot of answers. You're not really understanding as to why. But looking back, I the greatest gift was that was just a redirection. And that redirection was that, hey, universe saying this, you may be interested in this, but that's going to be short as to the impact that you could potentially have in something greater. And each job and each career never felt like, hey, I'm doing this for this reason. It was always just the next thing. It seemed like the next logical step. And really looking back and I think being at peace with that has really helped. You know, you talk about all the self-awareness and the self-acceptance and self-love, right? And a lot of that didn't really start until I forgave a lot of things that I had become such a part of my story that I had to look myself again hard in the mirror and say, okay, what parts of my story am I now use as an excuse for today's behavior or today's reaction or the way that I'm feeling about this situation? So I had a lot of wounds that I wouldn't let scar over. And without forgiveness, I finally allowed those to scar over, because for me to be a good leader, I feel like I need to know who I am, what I am, my strengths, my weaknesses, and be able to own all of it. But without that self-acceptance and that self-love and self-awareness, in my opinion, it's really challenging to lead others because you take things more personally, right? You put yourself at the center of every decision or every opportunity to talk about yourself. And I think those that are self-confident, really the confidence comes from within, and we don't have this external reliance on the opinions of others or the validation of others.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. You know, I was sort of, as you were starting that, and then you really dovetailed into it, but I was reminded of the Bob Marley quote that says, maybe your journey is harder because your purpose is greater. And you talked about that purpose and using those universal nudges, and that just kept sort of blinking as a sign in front of me. But, you know, you said something that I think is really interesting, and I've been talking a lot about this. I played a college sport. Did you play any sports growing up?
Yeah, I played soccer. Yep.
Okay. All right. And so I've been going back to this as I've been coaching people, you know, in executive leadership coaching, focusing on their experience as athletes. And it could be the same as dancing or, you know, arts or something else. But, you know, in sports, we're taught, well, that success happened. You can enjoy it tonight, but tomorrow we go back to practice. But if you lose, we're going to go in and do video study, and we're going to dissect all of those mistakes. And so we are hardwired to not revel in the success. And one of the things I've tried to do since going back to executive leadership coaching, you know, you ask someone, you know, we say, how are you doing? Just in casual conversation. And it's just a polite, I don't really care. I'm just asking because it's polite. But when you really look at someone and you say, how are you doing? Really? Right? Yeah. It forces them to sit in that for a minute. And I think we need to do that with success as well. How are you feeling about that success? So anyway, I just wanted to call that out. I appreciate you focusing on the negative and how you rebuilt from that, but we don't do enough to focus on the positives.
Definitely. And I think that was one of the things through my self-discovery was, I think, just celebrating success is really the crux of it all. Because you can look at other people and they come across confident, and the first things that they tell you are all their successes, right? And that was part of the reason why Tyler and I even started our podcast to begin with, was tell us where you made a left turn and you should have went right. Tell us when you when you fell flat on your face and it was a total mistake. Because I think societally we see like this essence of perfection, and call it from sports, and you're not good enough, and you know you're not good enough because you're not playing, and it was a very black and white, right? But societally, I think we have this essence of perfection, and just like you said before we got on the show, you know, like one take for this podcast. I love that because it shows authenticity, right? It doesn't give this false pretext that everything's great and everybody always knows what they're saying all the time, and they have the gift of gab or the gift of their words to elegantly say what they want to say. Because I think in Instagram and all these others is like, you see a family photo and they're all smiling in that photo, but if you sat with them for the hour and 45 minutes, they all wanted to cut each other's throats, right? So
right.
What is reality?
One perfect picture.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody say cheese, right? And for that 2 milliseconds that it takes to snap that photo, that's everybody's image of what life is always supposed to be. So I'm always supposed to be happier. I'm always supposed to find joy. I'm always supposed to And that's I had to realize that again the hard way, that my level of perfectionism really stood in my way of celebrating successes, because there's always something that could have been done better or could have went differently. So that's really where I'm focused more on being in the full present moment, which is a real
Yeah.
challenge for us humans as well.
Yeah. And, I've said this a couple times on the podcast, but, life is a series of peaks and valleys. And if you didn't have the valleys, the peaks would be meaningless, right? It would just be this linear life that you're leading. And so I think, yes, we want to dissect and learn from those mistakes, but you said it. You also have to give yourself grace, right?
Mm-hmm.
And forgive yourself, because if you're constantly hard on yourself, you can't learn, because you're in this almost fetal position or armor where you're just protecting against the next error that you're going to beat yourself up about. And I think most people, certainly in a leadership role, are probably the hardest critics they're going to find of themselves, right? They're going to be more of a, to get to a certain level, you're going to be harder on yourself than your boss or anyone else. So I think finding that grace as you did, and giving yourself the reality to just be human is so powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, to your point, it's like, less judgment and less expectations have been two of the greatest daily constant reminders that I bring into my intention, is because judging your past actions on today's knowledge is also not fair, right? It's like, well, did I know that then? And odds are you probably didn't. But to your point, I think we do have to be consciously aware of what tape we're continuously playing in our own minds.
Yeah.
Is it telling us that we're greater than what we are, or is it telling us that we're worse than what we are? And odds are it's probably somewhere in the middle. But without that reflection, I found journaling to be really helpful, as well as meditation. That allows me to center, right, mind, body, soul, and spirit, to be able to, when you are going through that difficult moment, saying, I don't understand this yet. And it's not final, right? Failure is not final until you quit. But is it your opportunity to learn? And that's why one of Mandela's quotes that I always loved is like, it's not how many times that I've lost or failed, I've never failed, right? Because I've never quit. And I know I butchered his quote, but
no, it's good.
More in essence, that's really what it is. And that's where I think it's like, it's not finite. It is this fluid process of what you said, peaks and valleys, but it does require the yin and the yang to know, hey, this I enjoyed, this I didn't enjoy, but without those experiences, you'll never really know.
Yeah. And look, if we're not growing, if you can't look back and see something as, wow, I've really evolved or changed from that, then where have you been for that time? I was reminded of this conversation I had recently. I wrote a book in 2009 about civic participation and civic engagement. And I always joke it doubles as a cure for insomnia or a doorstop. And, but we were talking about it, and I was like, I don't even want to open that book, because I'm sure it's cringe compared to my writing now and my perspective now. And the person said, yeah, but exactly what I just said, like, that was where you were then. And that was your skill set and your insight and your knowledge. And you should celebrate that, and celebrate the fact that, maybe looking back at that now, you're like, boy, that wasn't what I would write today. And that's okay. And, he was encouraging me to get back on that horse and write another book. That's a conversation for another day. But, if we're not growing, and you can look back a year, 6 months, 5 years, and it's just the same perspective, then you haven't done any work. You haven't grown.
Absolutely. And I think I realized the same thing that you realized, right? Is where was I for those years? And I realized how distracted I was, right? So you had sports, you have entertainment, you have kids, you have all. So if your mind wants you to be distracted, it's going to seek out a distraction, right? Yeah. And until you want to hold yourself accountable and really look yourself in the mirror and be in your own thought without music, right? Without some of these other things that we tend to do, most of us are running from ourselves. But then in the society, when we have this external need for validation or for worth or for love, ultimately, every individual is only looking for themselves. And that's really where I had to come, because I had all the success. I had all the things that told me that this is what you need, and this is what will make you happy, or this is what will make you feel purpose, right? Or passion. But I kept ending up with like, oh no, something's not right. Like, I'm missing something. And ultimately it was missing a relationship with myself. And I read a great quote in oh man, the name is escaping me. But basically the quote was that all world problems are interpersonal problems. And that really was what I needed to hear, because it was like, okay, all right, not everybody's got it all figured out. And I loved how you said, how are you doing? And that initial response is the armor that you also called out. That is your armor, right? Those are all the layers of the onion that you take out into society for whatever historical past context that you're using to reference to assume the same outcome today. What does it take to remove all that armor and really to truly be your authentic self? It takes more faith than it does fear.
Yeah. Is that what journaling gives you? You mentioned doing meditation and journaling. Is that how you get to that space?
Definitely. I think my mind, right, and it's easy to get sidetracked with an emotion, right? But until you dissect of why am I having this emotional response to this situation or this scenario, you'll keep having those emotions and you'll never be able to really determine what's the root cause of that emotion. So for me, my mind gets busy. And the only way I describe it, maybe because I'm Italian, but it looks like a bowl of spaghetti if I had to give a visual of it.
Yeah.
So I have all these thoughts and you're having all these emotions and you're having all these feelings. But until I started to pull each individual strand of spaghetti to say, okay, what is this? And somebody gave me the best practice. If you're really sitting there in indecision, writing down, what am I actually afraid of? Right. And when I did that and I saw on like the list wasn't even close to what my mind had made up.
Yeah.
And so for me, journaling, taking that reflection within the day, what did I accomplish? What did I achieve? And it's not just big things. There's a lot, right? As a chief operating officer, I wear a lot of different hats. I do a lot of different tasks. But if I'm not taking stock in that or chronological information of that, it can feel like I didn't accomplish anything within the day. And then start beating up with that old tape. Well, you didn't do anything with your time today. Why didn't you do anything with your time? And I had to also get really comfortable for a long time in sales. Every minute matters because every minute I knew down to the minute what I was making. So if I wasn't doing anything or my calendar wasn't booked, that created a sense of anxiety within me. So the concept of doing nothing, to journal, to meditate, to reflect, was like so foreign and felt so wrong. I had a lot of guilt and shame around it, where I was finally taking time for myself amongst all these other priorities and needs. It felt wrong, but then I started to realize how right it was and allowed me to really see the big picture. And to your point, get out of that autopilot. I think I was in autopilot for like 10 years.
Yeah.
And I'd rather do that at 36 than at my dad's age at 66 when he finally retired, I wanted to be conscious, aware.
Yeah. And you had just talked about, what you did there was prioritize yourself. You had all these other priorities and now you started to prioritize yourself. And, the coaching school I went to is ACT is their acronym. And it's, that introspection you're doing is giving you awareness. That awareness creates choice, and that choice allows you to transform, right? So, and I think it sounds like what I'm hearing you're getting from your time to focus on you, prioritizing you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then the willingness to grow that perspective too at the same time, and with grace, right? And while never losing hope at the same time that, that's who you were, but that doesn't determine who you will be. Because I think, again, I think our kids are our greatest example. It's my kid probably still believes that he can jump from the top of the Empire State Building and be okay. So there is this blind faith and this blind trust that they have that I think that every leadership book could be a lot of the books that I read my kids every night. These children books that preach values, and what are your values and how do you live up those values? And another hard reflection point for myself was those core values that we all talk about. How was I upholding those? Yes, publicly with others, but where I was falling short is keeping them with myself. And that was why it was like, oh man, I guess I'm not prioritizing myself, and that's, and here's the reasons why this is important and it's okay. You don't have to feel that guilt and shame like you're constantly on the clock.
Yeah. And I just want to play back something you said because it really struck me, and I suspect it will strike our audience as well. But you said who I was isn't necessarily who I'm going to be. Like that's really powerful.
Definitely.
Yeah.
But then taking it day by day. I was done with judging myself, right? Trapped in my past for past mistakes and decisions and poor choices that I made, while also in an attempt to predict and control my future, I was never in that present moment.
Yeah.
So not allowing things to play out, not assuming that the outcome was going to be the same. So a lot of it was forgiveness first, and then grow that awareness, to your point, to enable trust within myself. If I can't trust myself, how do I trust others?
Yeah. So I'm going to pivot here, and my wife says I jump. It's the ADD in me, but I jump from topic to topic. So I'm going to announce a pivot in advance. In your LinkedIn profile, in your header, you have leadership isn't a title, it's an action. I thought that's really interesting. What does that mean to you, and why is it important enough that you lead with that in your profile?
Yeah. I think actions speak louder than words, as that saying goes, and there's a lot of leaders, and I've met them, and I'm sure you've met them too. They know what to say, right? They know what they should be saying, but then what they say, their actions don't follow up or don't support what they're saying. And for me in leadership, anybody that I follow, right, whether it's a pastor or whether it's a coach or a business owner, I always like to know, hey, what you're saying, do you actually do it yourself? Because if you do it yourself, then I buy in. And now I believe in you. And if I have believed in you, now I have faith. And now I believe that what you did or the choice that you made, all I can compare that against is previous actions that you've taken or times where you said you were going to do something and you did. So I think it gets us back to that level of integrity. But for me, leadership starts with not only knowing what to say, but also taking the action, even when the times are tough. When this high pressure, stressful situation, are you still relying on those same values and the same words that you used previously to support into that equation of decision making?
Yeah. And in the PR world, we say your brand isn't what you claim it is. It's how people experience it. Right. So we can say, a leader can say, well, this is who I am and this is how I lead and this is how we're going to do things. But people will hear and see and get what they want. But that's also informed by the actions you take. And are they resonant? Are they, not authentic to what you're saying? So that makes a ton of sense. And I think that's an essence of our power as leaders, is doing the work. And, so my dad always used to say, I'm not going to, do something that I'm not going to ask you to do something that I didn't do first. Right.
Yes.
So I love that. Well, so you've been hosting your podcast for almost 5 years or more than 5 years. You've had 115 conversations. What are some of the things that jump out from you across those conversations that just are sort of those innate truths that resonate in all the conversations?
Oh, definitely the power of love versus fear, right? I think love-based leadership is something that I've really focused on too, because it only, again, is enabled if you love yourself first, right? You're not doing things for others to feel that same gratification or that same reciprocity, if you will. But fear-based cultures, right, and fear-based leaders, a lot of it is they have their own insecurities that get to play out in front of the audience of everybody else, right? And that can come from a variety, from micromanagement to aggression in the workforce. Those are kind of those symptoms of what would tell you that somebody isn't their best as an individual. And that goes into all the conversations that we had with just about every other leader. The leaders that knew who they were, weren't pretending who they were vulnerable and authentic enough to say what they didn't know, admit what they didn't know. Those were the leaders that, frankly, were leading the best. And you can see it from even the business itself and the success. Call it their turnover, call it their revenue, whatever KPI metric, which is usually after the fact. That's, in my opinion, the hardest part about KPIs that all business track. It's kind of like the output. It already tells you what you paid. But what are some of the inputs that drive those outputs? And that really to the essence. If I could summarize all 115 conversations, that really
it's a
is
small task to do.
Yeah, it definitely is. The ones that know who they are and not pretending.
Yep.
And yeah, because we also have had the guests that were insecure, and they talked the entire episode, and I think we asked only 3 questions, so that's definitely the aha moment that both myself and Tyler, my co-host, had, was the people that can admit failure and the people who can be themselves. Those are the people that really are the cream of the crop. And then we started hearing about, emotional intelligence and all these other keywords, right, that were starting to come on as we evolved post-pandemic. But it was like, those people were already doing that before. We didn't have a name for it at that time.
Yeah, I mean, there's just that's great. And there's just some practicality to that, right? Like, I understand if a company, anything from missing those KPIs to a real full-blown crisis to even the small things. Like, I get the keep a stiff upper lip and you want to project strength and you want to project confidence, but we are humans. We're not widgets in a company, right? And so they have real feelings, they have real intuition. And if you're not authentic you can still project confidence while also laying into the fact that, this didn't go as we hoped, and here's what we're going to do, or what do you want to do, right? Including people in that conversation. But just this blind, everything is okay, or, it's above your pay grade. Boy, that gets, uncovered real quick.
Yeah. Being vulnerable and transparent, I think we looked at it as a weakness for a long time in business.
Yep.
It's like, they can't know that information because they couldn't handle that information. Now that's right. That's you making a lot of judgments and assumptions right there, and to me, if we all have the same information and we over communicate, we allow those gaps to be filled in with truth rather than fiction. And what goes unsaid will get filled in. And I think that happens at a lot of organizations in their culture, right? It's like, let's not tell them that. If they don't think that their employees already know that the business isn't doing well because the shipments are down or their production rates are down, like, they're lying to themselves. So, hey, here, good, bad, and ugly, right? Here are all the facts. And then leave it as an open-ended question once you have built that trust environment. And that's all that I did here at Boulter, right? You guys have been doing this for 20 some odd years. You tell me what you think that we should be doing. And I really harped on more of the Toyota model style, where it blame the process, not the person, right? Mm-hmm. Were they trained effectively? Do they have clarity on what the expectations are and what the deadlines are? And if we've answered no to those questions, then how do I go and turn to the person and say, you didn't do this, and this is what we're going to do because of that? Now, I didn't do my part in order for you to have that clarity of that expectation, to your point, to see you more as a person who has wants, desires, and needs. But I would say all humans within the workforce, they want what you and I want. They all want to be listened to, they all want to be valued, and they all want to be heard. And if you're checking all those buckets and you're rewarding and recognizing the behaviors that you do want to see consistently, I think that helps you elevate those words that a lot of people throw up on their wall or on their webpage, on their mission statement. How do you take those words and move them into action?
Yeah. And boy, as you were sharing that, there's this, another blinking red light that when we say as leaders, they're not equipped to handle that, we've got to manage that. Well, whose fault is that?
Exactly.
Right? You're supposed to prepare and equip the team. And if they were prepared and equipped, maybe we wouldn't be in the situation we're in. So I just, as you were talking about that, I'm like, this blindness to.
Which is that subconsciously done, right? So do I subconsciously not want to teach somebody else how to do it so that it's more job security for myself? And I think that's kind of where we're starting to see in these other dynamics with the multi-generational workforce and succession planning in most businesses being an afterthought. Now it's a forethought, because now you realize, this person can do that in 10 minutes, but somebody new doing it for the first time, it might take them 2 hours.
Yeah.
And so understanding that, my greatest question when it came to understanding people and work was, why do we promote who we promote? Because as an entry-level employee that had a few years of success under his belt, I saw people getting promoted, and there was never really a good reason as to why. Right? Were they the number one salesperson? Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. You can sell. You're an individual contributor. Why don't we bring you in, and now you're going to manage 8 other people? And that logic was never really tested. And coming from a biology background, why was business never willing to test their hypothesis that they took as law for so long? And that's why I love data. I love numbers. I love making sure that whatever you assume is actually accurate. And that's where Tyler and I ended laughing, right? It's like you get that qualitative data from the conversations that we're having, but then the quantitative, right, is like, does it actually support that or does it not support that? And what we started to realize, a lot of the things that I'm sure your father said to you, my father said to me, my grandfather said to me, couldn't have been further from the truth. But it's putting that out on the table and then saying, okay, well, what do we do? Where do we go from here? And how do we make this better? And a lot of it comes from nature. Nature is probably one of the greatest businesses that we have, and it runs pretty much without thought. So those ecosystems, you make some rash changes and watch it all collapse, because it's no different than the silos within a business, right? It's like, oh, I didn't realize that when I turned that light switch, it turned all these other switches off for you too. So it's really building the community within the business, in my opinion, to have an effective culture, but also processes that support all divisions and all individuals down to that frontline employee doing most of the work.
Yeah. And, I appreciate you trying to bring data to the HR work that you've done. I mean, right, one of the things that is sort of known now is that what made you successful and brought you up as someone who we ought to put you in a leadership role, those aren't the skills necessarily that you need to be a leader. And so I work with a lot of mid-level managers who are going, okay, I caught the bumper. I got this role. Now what do? I don't know how to communicate like a manager. I don't know how to, what's my authentic leadership voice? What's my skill set, right? I've been focused on doing the work and being the best kick-ass salesperson I can be. How do I translate that to other people, right? So I appreciate you trying to unmask that and bring some data and process to that.
Yeah. And I support all the businesses that are utilizing you for that, because usually where most businesses stop was, oh, Andrew got the promotion that he always wanted. Great. It's all going to be good from here. But that's why human capital, it is capital. It's an investment. Are you continuously investing within that? Just like you do your home. Like if you just let your house from this day forward, anything that broke, you just weren't going to fix. Guess what? The resale value of that real estate is going to decrease over time.
That's right.
So it's no different within the professional space. Are you making that conscious, intentional investment, and then seeing, hey, is that investment working? Is it not working? And that's, again, a lot of the things where HR was constantly up against the opinions of a lot of leaders that did not have any data to support those opinions. That person just left because they were disgruntled. And then that's where we got off. Then, they're disgruntled. Okay, we're okay with it. But exit interviews have a great way of really telling you what's working and what's not working, and what needs to be reevaluated for its effectiveness.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate your time and our listeners' time. So I want to ask one more question. What advice would you give to others, trying to find their passion?
Yeah. Don't buy into the context that doing nothing is wrong. Take the opportunities to reflect about every experience that you have, both good, bad, and indifferent, and really start writing that down. What can you do all day that feels like the time is passing, right? And you're not even watching the clock. What things motivate you? What feeds your heart? What sings your song? And the more that you can start to document that through journaling, it allows you to start to see the roadmap or the star constellations to allow you to start to connect those dots. Because in essence, right, what you do for a job description or a title, yes, that's part of it, but it's not all of it. I was always a leader, even though I never had a title of a leader or executive. I always did what I thought I should be doing, and others happened to follow because they were like, oh, I guess that works. So for me is really taking the opportunity to reflect back, even from your first job that you ever held. What did you like about that experience? What did you not like about that experience? Because then these become things that I need to have or I don't need to have the next time that you're interviewing for an opportunity. And going in there with your wish list as well as your I don't really care list It allows you to not get, I guess, swayed in a direction via money out from a decision that you know is best for you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So Kevin, where can folks find you and your podcast online?
Yeah, so my podcast, as mentioned earlier, is Timeout with Leaders. You can find that on Apple and all the places where people go for music or podcasts. And then if anybody's interested in asking any questions, I'm an open book. But LinkedIn is always the best place to find me.
Awesome, Kevyn Rustici, thank you for being on today.
Absolutely, thanks so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
You got it. And this is the Walk On Podcast, people leading with passion and purpose, providing a roadmap for your personal journey. Hear their stories, find your passion, walk on.